1. My first proper job was in a call center. By the time I finish, I'll have been there a hair over 4 months. The job description said I'd be arranging hire cars for people who had recently been involved in accidents and maybe organizing repairs. From the job description and the interview, I had no idea this was related to insurance whatsoever. I assumed this was some kind of private hire and it would be straightforward. I didn't really care because I needed a job, so even though it wasn't my first choice, I went with it. My first choice was in a collections role, but luckily I didn't get that job. On the first day of training, we were told about what we'd actually be doing. I didn't fully understand this until later down the line, but we were instructing credit hire, and later for me, credit repairs, on behalf of insurance companies, accident management companies, and body shops. For the first 3 or 4 weeks, I'd be calling customers who had been told they'd be getting a courtesy car from us. They didn't understand what credit hire was, not that I'd expect them to, but later on down the line it made for some very angry calls from customers who didn't understand the business relationship between us and their insurance company. I don't know about anyone else, but inbound was so much worse for me. The number of rude people was astonishing. My best, friendliest calls were all outbound calls. I think the psychological factor of knowing you're forced into an inbound call makes it worse too. Other people there loved inbound and loved talking to the rude customers. I will never be that way. Almost 50% of calls, both inbound and outbound, were without issue. Very dull, very boring. People just running through the claim with me like they did with the poor souls in FNOL. I think the best customers are the ones that enjoy telling me their woes because they didn't mind, and maybe even enjoyed repeating themselves. The other 50% was a mix of confusion, fear, and anger. I don't know if it's the pseudo-anonymity a phone provides, but I am surprised some of these people have friends and family. I don't understand why people risk being so rude when we get them to confirm their name and address. Imagine if they were speaking to some psychopathic lunatic. Anyway, some of them were abhorrent, to say the least. Complaining, whinging, whining, mostly because, quite frankly, they had no idea that their car insurance policy was merely asking us to see if we can help. They were led to believe this was all guaranteed and they'd definitely be getting a replacement vehicle. If we can't recover our costs from the third-party insurance company, there's nothing we can do whatsoever. While I understand why people get so emotional over their cars, and I understand why people don't wish to read through all their policy documents, it doesn't help the fact that I just can't stand being spoken to in such a rude way. I'm not as resilient as I first thought, I suppose. To make matters worse, the job required a half-hour commute there and back at minimum. But most days, especially Mondays, it would take 40 to 45 minutes. The wages are especially poor because the business is an outsourcing company, so we're paid as little as they can get away with. So with me owning an older petrol car, fuel expenses are into my wage. I started looking for a new job last year and I found one. I've accepted a new job working at an insurance broker's local to me. It's still a phone-based role, but it seems more sales-focused than pure customer service. They asked me about the volume of work I'm used to now, and said it's far lower than what I'm used to. And it's not like a call center environment with a toilet and lunch codes, etc. When I was shown around the floor I'd be working on, it was silent compared to my current job. And considering one of the workers could take 20 minutes out of her time to show me around the system they use, it seems like a dream in comparison. Fingers crossed it is. To my surprise, the best thing about where I work is the management. They are really nice, and if we ever run over at the end of a shift, they'll let us get back that time at lunch or by leaving early. My colleagues are also very nice too. Still, it's not enough to make me want to stay. To everyone working in claims in an insurance company, I salute you. 2. Little bit of background for anyone not based in the UK. Every vehicle driven on the road must have a minimum of third-party liability insurance to cover costs if there's an accident resulting in injury or damage to someone other than the driver. You typically, as a car owner, insure your vehicle for yourself and name additional drivers. Now, and whether this is right or wrong is a completely different debate, the insurers make decisions based on the driver's profile to see if they are high risk. People will be creative to present themselves as a lower risk, and when this amounts to false representation, it counts as insurance fraud. At best, you don't have your claims covered or be expected to pay the difference in premiums to get them paid. At worst, this could have your insurance voided, and if the courts are satisfied you were driving without valid insurance, you could end up with a number of convictions. One high risk is highly modified cars because the value of the modified car is usually higher than a standard one, and the people who like to modify cars are more likely to drive faster and other behaviors that make them more likely to have accidents. And it isn't necessarily the value of your car that limits the value of the claim. If you drive into the back of Beyoncé and Jay-Z and disrupt their musical careers, that is a heck of a lot of liability there.
I want you to explain why my car insurance has been cancelled.
The letter confirms that the vehicle has been highly modified from the factory version, and this wasn't declared when you insured the car.
I had no idea. I bought it second-hand, and it was like that when I bought. We aren't all car experts.
You drove the car 2 weeks ago to a car show and entered it in a best modified car competition.
How on earth do you know that?
A representative of the company went to the show and checked the registration numbers of the cars against our customer database.
But that's cheating!
3. Please be aware the following story contains references to pet death. A long time ago, I dealt with some pet insurance complaints and an interesting death of a pet claim. This, to the best of my recollection, was the content of the letter I sent in response. Some details have been changed for anonymity purposes, and the passage of time means others are a little hazy. Dear Mrs. Smith, firstly, I would like to say how sorry I am to hear about the loss of Lucy. Please accept our condolences. Following your call last week, I have completed a full review of your file, including telephone calls, all paperwork submitted, and the medical history provided by your veterinary surgery. I would like to point out that the medical history is a legal document, and as such is required to be accurate by both the law and regulatory bodies. I notice on the 1st of May, you contacted us to query if you could claim the cost of Lucy's purchase price if she died as a result of the medical condition. We confirmed that this was not the case, and she was only covered through an accidental death. This raised concerns on 2 points. Firstly, insurance is for unforeseeable events, and to checking cover just before a claim suggests her death might not have been unexpected. Secondly, according to the medical history, that was the day she was diagnosed with a heart condition. The claim for Lucy's accidental death was submitted to us via a typewritten letter dated 26th of May. In the letter, you describe how the day before Lucy, on returning from the vets after a checkup, she ran through the vestibule of your home and caught her lead on a door, slamming it shut behind her. The door was jammed, and by the time you were able to access it with the help of your builder, she was dead. I compared this to the medical history, and the notes state she died on the way home, presumably from her heart condition. We have received a letter from your vet stating that you have since contacted them to explain you were so distraught on the day of Lucy's death that the communication was garbled and incorrect information was logged. However, the vet that wrote the letter was not the individual who logged the telephone call. The telephone call took place on the 27th of May, after your detailed letter was written. We have also spoken to the vet who made the notes. She has confirmed they accurately record the information you gave her. During the course of the claim, we asked for a statement from an independent witness to confirm the circumstances of Lucy's death. We specifically asked for a description in their own words. The letter sent to us by your builder was typewritten using the same typewriter and notepaper as the original claim letter, and even used the same unusual vocabulary, such as vestibule, as this suggests the description was not in his own words. We contacted your builder to ask him to clarify some information. Despite being able to describe Lucy in great detail, he had clearly come to know her well over the years. He wasn't able to confirm important aspects of her accident. For example, which part of the door her lead had become caught on, how long the lead was, or the size of the gap between the door and the door frame. I would expect an experienced builder to be very familiar with the construction of a door in a door frame, particularly if he had removed the door and rehung it. I also note that during telephones with our department, whenever we ask you to clarify any detail regarding your claim, you immediately state we are calling you a liar and trying to commit insurance fraud. On balance, I have reviewed your claim and found there is insufficient evidence to conclude Lucy died as a result of an accident, and have no option but to decline your claim. Kind regards, Merkalurka. 4. During a previous incarnation, I dealt with complaints when people were on holiday. This particular customer always stuck with me, and an unreasonable complainer. As always, information has been kept vague or changed to protect the innocent. Now, the unreasonable complainer was enjoying an evening meal with his family when he experienced a medical emergency and had to be flown by air ambulance off the holiday island to the nation's capital to get life-saving emergency treatment. He didn't have clothes in the hospital because they were cut off him. His wife took his young children home straight away, so he was alone in a foreign hospital after getting as close to death as most of us will get. So I fully accept that this must have been a terrifying experience. But despite saving his life and not having to find a penny to pay for it, he didn't like the local healthcare system. His wife asked if we would fly out their adult children so he has someone to look after him. This was unusual, but it was cheaper than moving him to a private hospital, so we agreed. Unreasonable complainer complained that we talked to someone other than him. We flew his wife out instead, paid for her hotel, cash advanced her money to cover living expenses, so she didn't have to keep receipts then claim back late, and booked taxis as she couldn't speak the language. Unreasonable complainer complained that the taxis weren't always on time, and we should be able to stop the national strikes that were causing this. We moved her to a different hotel that was not as nice, but close enough to walk to the hospital. This was fine until he was discharged, and then unreasonable complainer complained it was not nice enough, in the middle of nowhere, and that part of the city smelled bad. We moved them back to the first hotel, only after he inspected it and 2 others for comparison, and doubled down the living allowance as he was now recovering with his wife until he was well enough to fly home. Unreasonable complainer complained that all the food was foreign, and they didn't know what they were buying. I looked into all his complaints and had to explain that no one was at fault for his experience, so I wasn't compensating him. He took it much better than I was expecting, but he told me he wasn't in the mood to discuss it, because his wife had left him, because he complained too much. 5. I am keeping this as vague as possible, otherwise the innocent parties, aka me, will be too easy to identify. Characters are me and a lazy bitch. And the scenario is that I work for a utility company helping people who struggle to pay their bills. Normally it is very rewarding, as I get to help people out of debt. On the other hand, there are people out there who think the world owes them for breathing. I also need to remember the customers who don't get into debt, and not make them subsidize the people who refuse to pay.
I need you to reduce the debt in my account.
I would be happy to look into that for you, after the usual checks. The only way I can reduce the debt in your account is by sending you a form to claim a grant to supply your debt for you, unless you still have one of the forms we have sent you in the past.
I need you to reduce the installments amounts.
I'm sorry, you are currently on the minimum tariff and making the minimum contribution to your debt. I cannot reduce it further.
I cannot afford the payments quoted. You have to reduce them.
At this point, I need to explain that her payments are deducted direct from one of her income sources, under rules directed by lawmakers, not me. Again, keeping details vague. There is no way to reduce the installments because they are already at the minimum. Am I repeating myself?
I have to take care of my children, and you are taking too much money.
You have a different source of income for taking care of children.
That's for my kids.
Yes, because you have higher utility bills because you have kids, so you need to allocate some of that income to paying your utility bills. But I can't tell customers that.
Lower the installments, or I want your manager to do it instead.
My manager won't change the installment amount either.
You lowered the amount before.
I checked every bill and payment plan for the last 2 years, broke down the amounts involved to show she was paying the minimum each time, and this payment plan was using the same breakdown. Also, told her she should have been charged for a price increase 3 months ago. That would be higher than she needs to pay now, but as a service delayed the price increase so she could apply for a cheap tariff, aimed at our poorest customers, subsidized by our other customers. Also mentioned the grant forms we had sent her multiple times in the past, which if she actually bothered to return to us, would have fixed this problem for her.
I still want you to lower the installments.
I have explained that isn't possible.
So, will you lower the installments?
No. What do you want me to do? The customers have to directly ask to speak to a manager. I can't volunteer.
Lower the installments.
They are already the lowest possible amount.
So what do you suggest I do?
Send us the grant form, and once we get that, we can look at reducing your payments. Disconnected. That is an hour of my life I will never get back. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Please Hold, episode 29. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button, and share the video with friends and family, because why not? If you'd like early access to these videos, then support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring. And if you enjoyed today's video and would like to leave a tip, then you can do so by clicking on the little heart with a $sign in the middle below the video. You don't have to do that, but I appreciate it, and thank you very much if you do. Righty, there's no other business today, so let's move right along to today's question and answer of the day. And today's question is, for those of you who recycle, do you actually look at the label before you toss it in the bin to see if it's fully recyclable? Because that is one of the most annoying, frustrating things I've come across. I'm happy to recycle. I mean, here in the UK, we got 4 separate bins to put our trash in, and we just kind of split up the relevant things into the right bins. And it's fine. It actually works out quite well. And I generally find, especially with plastics, the idea that something is partially recyclable, well, why not just make the whole thing recyclable, man? It's not rocket science, you know? It's just make the whole thing out of recyclable materials. To my eternal shame, I use a lot of plastic because I buy bottled water, like mineral water, that sort of thing. Because I like it. I think it tastes nicer than tap water. I tend to get Volvic, Evian, Buxton, or if they're all out of stock, I'll get the Nestle if I really, really have to, in spite of their very naughty reputation. You know, forgive and forget and all that nonsense. So that's my grumble for the day. Why don't you let me know what your answers are in a comment below. And before we go, speaking of answers, let's have the answer of the day from the last video. And today's answer comes from Trisha Rai Chatterjee. I think I'm getting that right. I hope I'm getting that right. And their answer is, there is an Indian brand of chips that has the peppermint chutney flavor. Think about peppermint chutney you would get if you ordered samosas, the green chutney, and additional that I do like some spicy chips. Trader Joe's waffle cut ghost pepper potato chips are ridiculous. I also like the 2 potato chip flavors you've mentioned above. Rosemary and thyme, but Deep River is kettle chips. as well as kettle-cooked salt and pepper chips, as well as jalapeno chips. I also like pizza-flavored Pringles, cheese-flavored Pringles, and muchos chips. Thank you very much for your answer, Trisha. Okay, with that, I think I'm gonna head off for now. Thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.